The focus of this NATO meeting has really been on two issues: the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the advance of the terrorist group ISIL in Iraq and Syria. On Ukraine, Canada supports tougher sanctions and the further economic and political isolation of the Putin regime. We have been a leading contributor to NATO's reassurance efforts in Eastern Europe, and at this summit, Canada supported additional measures to increase NATO's capabilities and responsiveness. Now, let me comment on the situation in Iraq. We, like our allies, have grown increasingly alarmed in recent months by the growing power of ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, and the carnage that ISIL is wreaking in its expansion. It has carried out barbaric acts of terror against Iraqi men, women, children, and minorities. Canada and our allies have responded. Our government has already contributed to humanitarian efforts underway in the region, and along with our American, British, French, and Australian friends, RCAF transport aircraft have also delivered critical military supplies to the government of Iraq and Kurdish forces fighting ISIL. But ISIL's horrific rampage continues, symbolized most recently by the savage murders of James Foley and Stephen Sotloff. There can be no doubt that the establishment and expansion of ISIL's terrorist caliphate is not only a threat to millions of innocent people, it has become a grave danger to the security of the region. And if left unchecked, this lawless area will become a training ground for international terrorists and an even greater threat to the security of Canada and its allies. In recent weeks, I've spoken to our allies about this crisis. I've expressed Canada's full support for the actions taken thus far to contain ISIL's advance. Based on the assessment of needs on the ground, President Obama has requested a commitment of Canadian military advisors. In response to this request, Cabinet has authorized the deployment of several dozen members of the Canadian Armed Forces. These personnel will work with their U.S. counterparts who are assisting and advising Kurdish forces in northern Iraq. Following final sign-off from the government of Iraq, Canadian personnel will be positioned for an initial period of up to 30 days. This commitment will be reassessed at that time. This is not a combat mission, and our role is clearly defined. Canada is joining our allies in providing critical advice to forces in northern Iraq as they continue to hold back the terrorist advance. But while this mission is low risk, it is not without risk. Our men and women in uniform are ready to answer this call, and I thank them for always being prepared to defend Canadian values and interests in a dangerous world. And I'll take a couple of questions.
Merci, Monsieur le Premier Ministre. We'll start with Terry Milewski from the CBC.
Thank you. Prime Minister, on the question of the military advisors, Canadians will naturally be concerned about the risk of mission creep, unintended consequences, kidnapping and the like. ISIS or ISIL has, let's call them Islamic State, has a proven ability to spring tactical surprises, to move fast, to get behind you when you think they're over there, they're over there. Would you agree that there's simply no guarantee that our advisors will not be in harm's way, that they may end up with more than they bargained for?
As I've said very clearly, Terry, in my statement, I've said very clearly this is not a mission without risk. We've evaluated the risks. I know the Canadian Armed Forces have evaluated the risks. We think the risks are acceptable and manageable, but the risks do exist. And the Canadian military and the personnel who join it exists to take on reasonable risks in the defense of their country's interests, and that's what they're doing in this situation, and I thank them for that. As I say, the risks are not, we don't think the risks are enormous, but the risks are very real.
Murray Brewster from the Canadian Press.
Prime Minister, in London you were talking about the possibility or the likelihood of increasing defense spending. Your officials have been reasonably clear that Canada is prepared to increase defense spending. Can you tell us whether there will be an increase? Can you bring some clarity to that? Can you say by how much and when? And also, can you tell us how you convince your allies of your sincerity to increase defense spending over the long term?
Well, first of all, Canada has been increasing its defense spending. As I mentioned, in London and elsewhere, I think it's up some 27% since we took office. And more importantly, a significant percentage of that expansion of expenditure is investments in equipment and capacities of the Canadian Armed Forces for the future. I think, in all fairness, in fact, this is exactly what President Obama, Prime Minister Cameron, and others have said to us, that their real concern here has been there are many countries in which defense spending is falling quite rapidly, and even more concerning by the fact that it's falling, that investments in equipment and capacities is ceasing. And so there is a very real possibility that in many countries we will see significantly diminished capacities in the years to come. So, look, I've been very clear, and I'll be clear again. We will be increasing. I think there's no doubt, even according to our own plans, existing plans, we will be increasing our defense expenditure. We recognize the likelihood, based not just on this conference, but events in the world, that capacities will have to increase. The tempo of the Canadian Armed Forces involvement in the world will likely have to increase, and Canada will do its share in those things, as we always do. But that will be what determines our increased spending, the need to do the spending. I don't, in any area of government, set a budget or just say we'll spend a certain amount and then go out and try and spend it no matter how we can spend it. That's not how we do business. And I'm certainly not going to spend on a massive military expansion just for the sake of doing so. But as I say, and our allies can be assured, and I think are assured, that Canada will spend what is necessary, obviously to protect ourselves, but also to be part of our joint alliance and global security obligations.
We'll continue with Bruce Campion-Smith from the Star.
Prime Minister, good afternoon. Today, NATO approved a new readiness action plan to make it sort of more nimble, better able to deal with the threats of the future. And as part of that, cornerstone is a new rapid reaction force. Can you describe what contributions Canada will be making to that force? And perhaps, if not, just why not?
Well, I think the short answer is no. And the easy reply to that is that the nature and the capacities of the response force are not yet defined in any substantive way. We've certainly indicated we're fully supportive of the concept, recognize the need, and we will be working with our allies in the months to come and with the NATO leadership to define what this response force will look like and what its capacities will actually be. But at the moment, frankly, we have very little in the way of detail. But as I say, that's going to be part of an ongoing dialogue. We look forward to it.
Laurie Graham, CTV.
Hi, Prime Minister. Yesterday, former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, a man that your own party touted as being a true conservative just in the last day or so, came out against your foreign policy, saying that it wasn't strong enough, that it didn't have enough teeth. What do you say?
I say that I think the record is clear that Canada's ability to contribute concretely in international affairs has never been higher, whether it's on hard power side like the military or the things we're doing on development, particularly our leadership on child and maternal health. And I think those are the facts, and I think they're widely recognized in the world and by Canadians.